Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Welcome back to part 2 of getting my Serissa japonica show ready. Here is a look at the tree in the sunshine. It really changes the appearance of the tree when it's got sun on it. I've done a little more pruning, opening up a little more space between the branches. So you can see I've pruned off a little bit here, and there's some clippings over here. Yeah, I think it's looking better. So today I'll be working on the landscape. Right now it is very, very lush with moss. And you can see it's climbing up the roots once again. So it should be quite fun and creative, creating a nice looking landscape for the tree. I will be repotting this tree this coming spring. And I may change the front just slightly, tweak it. I may change the angle of the tree slightly. It's a little low on this side of the tree compared to this side, so I think just a slight angle change will improve the look of the tree. I'm also going to move the tree a little closer to the center. But for now, I'm thinking I have these rocks that kind of counterbalance the tree on the one side. I'm thinking of maybe expanding the copy here, this kind of rock outcrop, make it a little larger to help counterbalance the tree a little more. The tree's kind of grown since I originally created this, and I think it needs something a little stronger on the left-hand side here. I'll head outside to my rock collection and see what stones I have that would match these existing ones, and maybe expand that to a slightly larger hill. In my stone collection out here, I try and keep the similar rocks together. So, you know, this style of stone, I've got them all on this skid. Towards the back of the skid, I have rounded stones. Over this side, I have more yellowy limestones. And in this little tray down here, I have all my reddish colored rocks that would match the rocks in that landscape. Here is a look at the possible rocks I have. So the rocks in it right now aren't really a reddish color. They're more of an maybe an orange to tan color. So down here I have a lot of very red rocks, but there's a few in here that are more kind of tan colored. Let me just see what, yeah, they kind of stand out. The red rocks against the tan, they definitely stand out as being a bit out of place. And I just noticed the skies are getting kind of black outside here. I'm wondering if we're getting more rain today. It sure looks like it. Well, no sooner did I speak, it started to rain. So it was a good thing I got that shot of the Serissa, the sunlight, when I did earlier this morning. Yeah, here it comes. You can see the drops forming on the windows here. Rain is on the way. I've been trying out the red rocks, and I think they're too red. So I thought, well, I've made a copy before with using these orange colored rocks, so I looked around some more and I found my orange rock collection. So I'll try some of these. They'll tone in better with the existing stones. Like that one's an identical stone to the big one I have over here. So I think I can make something quite nice out of these orange colored stones. Here is a look at my initial composition. So I think it's looking pretty good. It certainly counterbalances the tree. It kind of breaks the pot up, so you know, I would say if the tree was just alone in the pot, the ideal pot size would be somewhere here. So it kind of separates the pot, the landscape over here and the tree side here. I think it looks good. I put a detailed rock up front. I moved the zebra up front, so these look more like they're in the background because they're smoother. And yeah, stronger copy here. I think it's getting close anyway. So I think I'm going to start working on the tree. You can see that the trunk is kind of covered in algae. It's kind of green looking. which is the exact opposite of what you want for a kind of desert tree. You want it bleached white by the sun. I'm going to try soap and water on the trunk of the tree, see if I can clean that algae off. If that doesn't work, if it's not doing the job, I may have to use like a dilute solution of vinegar or something like that. I'll put a cloth around the base of the tree to kind of catch most of the soap and water as I'm spraying and scrubbing with the toothbrush. I don't know if this, dilute mixture of soap and water is harmful to the roots or not, but I'll try and minimize the amount of soap and water going to the root system. So here I go, I'll spray the trunk, and this has the possibility of, dislodging a lot of that flaky bark. But, you either have to have a green trunk or you've got to scrub it with a toothbrush, and choose one or the other. I've tried not to water this trunk. Like when I water the tree, I don't get the trunk wet, to sort of minimize the amount of algae that's developing on the trunk. But here in the greenhouse, it's almost impossible to keep it, There's so much humidity that algae kind of grows on the trunk no matter what. If it was outside on the bench in full sun, it probably would have some bleaching effect by the sun, and I wouldn't get as much algae buildup. So, however, this year was a really cool summer, so I think the tree benefited from being in the greenhouse. You always have to weigh the positives and the negatives of every situation. This year I kept my ficus on the outdoor benches because I wanted them to get the full sun and grow strongly, and I wasn't so concerned about aerial roots this year. However, I will, maybe, if not next year, the year after, I will put them in the greenhouse here with the misting system running, and in hopes to generate all kinds of new aerial roots on the trees. Okay, so it's looking better. It's kind of revealed more of a tan color on the trunk rather than sort of that gray color, but at least it's not so green. Which is what I'm trying to get rid of. That green just doesn't make the tree look like it's growing in a dry, arid environment. It makes it look like it's in a lush environment. Okay, here I go rinsing it off with rainwater. So I did get some of the bark flaking off, but it still looks good. It looks definitely better. Okay, I'll unwrap the towel now. I've got to do this lower part. Yeah, that looks a lot better. It's the color of the trunk, especially after some of that bark's peeled off, matches these rocks over here really, really nicely. Like, not just nicely, but I would say exact. And it really ties the whole composition together. Here's a look showing the trunk color here, how it matches the rocks really nicely. And the branch structure up here matches nicely too. So, yeah, very complementary. Before I begin scrubbing the root base in the lower trunk, I'll need to remove the moss that's growing up around the root base of the tree. So I'm just picking that off with tweezers. All that early root work, when the tree's young, you get those radial roots sorted out. And then as the tree matures, all those radial roots thicken up and it begins to look like a really mature tree. So root work is very important. The roots on this tree extend quite far out from the base of the tree. So it'll be important to expose them. I don't want to cover up those nice roots. You want to show them off, because it is a feature of these desert type trees is that the roots reach out in search of moisture. And usually they're not deep roots. They kind of go along the surface for long distances. They always have some roots that go deep, but generally they go outwards. And I think that's because all the fertile parts of the soil are on the top layer in the desert. And down below there's like 0 to no nutrients, or little to no nutrients. It's all on the surface from, leaf debris that's fallen off the tree. A lot of animals make the tree their home, bats, primates, a lot of elephants and zebras rest underneath the trees, and they all create organic matter. That's a nice way of putting it. And it builds up underneath the tree, and that's what the roots are looking for. So generally on these acacias you find some pretty good surface roots on them. And usually they're quite wild looking. So this Serissa is a good tree for that, because they get quite wild looking roots. I was always fighting to keep these roots nice with this tree. Trying to get, a nice kind of radial root spread. And yeah, you can achieve it. You just got to keep working at the root base. Every time you repot it, make the root system the best you can. Make every repotting count. Don't waste repotting without working on the roots. That's my philosophy. If you're going to pull the tree out of the pot and work on roots, really look at the surface roots and try and get them sorted. And, not just the surface roots, but the entire root system, because it really makes the tree, as the tree gets older and mature, can really add a look of age to the tree and stability and miniaturization. It makes the trees look miniature. Young trees and plants don't have nice radial root bases. It's only old mature trees that do. And that's the look you're going for, is an old mature acacia here. At least that's what I'm going for here. Some trees, the goal isn't to make an old looking tree like Japanese maples. A maple tree, when it gets old, branches start breaking and rotting, and it gets a hollow trunk, and an old maple tree isn't the most beautiful thing sometimes. They're kind of old and decrepit looking. So when you're styling a maple tree, you're kind of styling it to represent the tree in the prime of its life, when it's still youthful enough to be totally healthy, but not so young that it's immature, the structure. So now you can style a maple to look like an old ancient maple that's kind of in the last years of its life, and it's a different look. But generally maples are styled to look young and vigorous and beautiful, not old and decrepit and on their last legs. And you can do that with any tree. A pine tree can look young and youthful, or they can look old and ancient and weather beaten. So it all depends what look you're going for in your tree. I've been working away, exposing the surface roots. So you can see it has quite a wide spread. That should look nice when it's all cleaned up. Here is the back of the tree. So I've got the root base exposed. Looking nice. So next, I've got to scrub the tree with the soap and water, the tree and the roots. Okay. There's quite a bit of flaky bark at the back of the tree here. I don't mind scrubbing it off because insects can hide in that bark. And I don't want a lot of really loose bark on the tree. So it takes quite a while to clean up the trees. I think I spent about an hour exposing the root base, picking the moss off. But it's always worth it. Like I said, you know, prepping your tree for a show, when you see one that's prepped really, really well, it stands out. And when you see one that's not prepped well, it also stands out because it just doesn't look as polished as it could. Okay, I'll give that a rinse with rainwater now. See where I'm at. Well, it sure looks better. But I could still do a little more work. Okay, I think that's got the back of the tree cleaned up quite nicely. Yeah, what a beautiful colored trunk that is. It's just wonderful. All right, I'll turn the tree around and clean up the front of the root base. Okay, on goes the soap and water to the front of the tree. And I'll scrub that. I think the root base is just slightly nicer at the back of the tree, but at one time I debated about turning it around, making the back the front, but the branch structure wasn't as good, so you know, there's always compromises with trees, especially when you're picking the front. It's not always cut and dry, the one view. Oh, here comes the sun. We did get a little bit of rain today, so I won't have to water my outdoor trees once again. Okay, I'll rinse that off and we'll see how it's looking. It's still a little green. I'll have to keep scrubbing. Especially down here. It's pretty loose bark there. I might have to peel that off. Here it comes, it's peeling off by itself. Guess that's one way of getting rid of the algae, just peel the bark off. I used to have a branch growing out here that I trained as a dead branch, and it was doing well, but then as the canopy got larger on the tree, it just shaded it out and it eventually died. And then I kept the dead branch on there for a long time, and then it eventually got so brittle that it just kind of disintegrated by itself. I didn't break it off or anything. It just kind of got old and just came off. Okay. Time to do the final rinse, I think, and I think that'll be good. Yeah, it's looking good. Yeah, it looks very, very nice. Reminds me a lot of like the old Chinese elms, the kind of different colors you get on the trunk. But yeah, I think that looks really beautiful. I like the difference in color. I think it's just, yeah, just wonderful. I noticed when I wet my stones, there's one back here that's just too red. I better take that away. It stands out as being too bright. My next step is to work on the landscape. And previously, many years ago, it was all covered in moss, and then I picked out all but little tufts of moss to look like grasses, and it looked really nice. So I'm going to try for that look again. So I'll leave patches of moss, just little tufts sticking up, and the rest will just become a sand layer. In the past, I've covered the surface of the soil with that athletic turfus. It's kind of a red color, and I was trying to get that look of the South African red sand kind of look. And I think it was fairly successful. I don't think it was the perfect color. I thought about getting like a terracotta pot and kind of smashing it up with a hammer into fine particles and trying that. I think that would be a better color. It would tone with the rocks better and the tree. So I'll do my moss work first, picking out all the moss but keeping little tufts. And then we'll think about the top dressing, the basic color, if I want to just go with the desert colored sand or with the orangey red sand. I'll come in with the tweezers, and generally the grasses and that grow in the shade of the tree, and then when you get out into the open areas, it's more just sand. So there's always a bit of vegetation at the base of, you know, these acacia trees, just because it's, as I said, it's shady. There's a lot of animals and organic matter they leave behind that causes smaller plants to thrive. So I'm going to start with my first tuft. I'll pull out everything around this little piece of moss, holding the moss in place with my finger, and just see how it looks in the end. And these little spores on the moss kind of stick up and look like grasses, so most of the time they don't look that great, but in this type of a planting they add to the natural effect and can look quite good. So I'm just leaving little tufts of moss. So between pruning the tree up and working on the landscape, there's, you know, a good solid 2 days work. That's why you can't leave your show prep for the last minute, because it just won't look its best. You've got to really take a detailed look at your planting and really work on the effect you want to achieve. And even under a bonsai, you know, you have a little bit of landscape at the base of the tree, and again, you want to make that landscape count. It can add to the effect of the tree or the overall style of the tree, or, you know, with the wrong kind of understory planting, it can take away. So if you have a rugged tree that's growing, looks like it's growing on a mountaintop, you know, maybe lush moss underneath the tree isn't what you want. Maybe you want it mainly rocks and sand, and maybe just the odd tuft of greenery. And yeah, something like that can really add to that mountain look that you're, you know, styling your tree in. Whereas, you know, tufts of just covering the whole thing with moss might be the wrong look you're going for. It makes it look lush and, yeah, counter to the point, or the opposite of the effect you're looking for. So what I do is, you know, I'll study landscapes. I'll look at acacia trees online, and I'll look what's underneath them. And it gives you good ideas. Like, many of them have termite mounds growing beside them. So that might be something you want to do, is create a little miniature termite mound. You could create one out of colored cement. Just kind of drip the cement down to create a termite mound. Yeah, so there's a lot of things you can do. So, you know, instead of just thinking, well, I'll just moss the tree up for the show, maybe think a little deeper. Think, well, how can I add to the tree. So it's not just moss, it's a landscape. And it can be very subtle. You can add some effects that are very subtle, so it doesn't take away from the tree. You know, it doesn't overpower the tree. So I'm starting to get that effect. It's going to take a lot of, you know, work and fine tuning to get it to look just right. So for now I'm just kind of making the moss patchy, and then I'll come in and look at the overall look and decide if I want to go lighter with the moss, heavier, because you can always add moss tufts if you've taken too much away. So hopefully you can start to see the effects I'm after. It's important to get separation between your clumps of moss and not to have the clumps too big or they look like bushes, which can also look good, but in this case I want it to look more like grass. Oh, it's starting to rain again. We've had every kind of weather today. Sunshine, rain. Haven't had any snow, thank goodness. Speaking of snow, I really enjoyed last winter out here in the greenhouse almost every day filming. It was really, really enjoyable, and it sure made winter go by quickly. Just because I was always outside, even though I'm in a greenhouse, it felt like, you know, you never left the backyard. Now, if you want, zombie apocalypse. If you want perspective, you can make larger clumps of grass out front, and as you get towards the back of the planting, make them smaller and finer and closer together, and that'll give you a bit of perspective in your landscape. That is definitely a zombie apocalypse happening. Oh my goodness. I'll be on full zombie alert here in the backyard. So far I haven't had any zombies infiltrate the backyard. I noticed last time I added that red kind of sand that it's very dark. And I'm thinking maybe, you know, the lighter sand would look better. It would be more of a contrast between the clumps of moss and the ground. So maybe, you know, that white sand, maybe just add a bit of the powdered red color to it, so it's lighter and brighter, or just maybe even just the sand color would look good. Here is a look at my progress on the moss, so you can see the little tufts, and from the front view it looks like little tufts of grass or foliage. So I still have a little bit of work to go towards the back of the planting, and then I'll have to add the sand and wash it. That'll be exciting. Here is a look at all the moss I took off. A lot. And here's the landscape now. So you can see the little patches of moss. So next I'm going to add my sand. And this is where I have to decide the color. Do I go with the desert tan, which I think would look nice? I think there's enough of that tan color in the rocks back here that it would blend in nice, and same with the trunk. So I'm going to try that, my standard desert sand color, and see how it looks. I've got my bucket of sand for the landscape, so here I go. Alright, I'll use the golden spoon that Tom sent me. This will provide a lot of contrast between the moss and the sand. It'll certainly change the look of the landscape, for better or worse. Alright, I think I'm ready to do the wash. Alright, here I go. washing it all down. And we'll see what it looks like. Gotta wash all that sand out of the moss. Work it in to the landscape. Okay. Well, that certainly changes the look of it. I think I'm going to add some regular playground sand around the base of the tree. Sort of like the shadow underneath, and keep the lighter colored moss around the edges. I think it looks a bit too bright at the moment, so I'll try that. I've got a container of the regular colored playground sand, which is much darker. So I'll put that around the base of the tree and see if it looks better. I think that lighter sand is maybe just a little light. I'll use my toothbrush to kind of thin the layer of sand out a bit. I've got my birthday watering can out, my copper watering can from Japan. I think I'll get a higher pressure to kind of wash that sand around. At least I think I will. All right, here I go. Yeah, that's better. Here is a look at the planting from the front now. The sun's come out and lit up the trunk of the tree. Yeah, I think that's looking quite good. I think the moss will kind of fluff back up. There'll be some subtle changes, I'm sure, before showtime. But I think it's basically looking quite nice. I'm happy with it. So that's another tree made show ready. This tree began life as a tiny little cutting in a tiny little pot. I bought it from Eldon Lease, one of the founders of the KW Club. So it's getting on to be about 30 years old, and it's nice to see it maturing. Yeah, it's always nice when your bonsai start to mature and you can see the rewards of all your work, the root base, the branch structure. And I'm looking forward to developing this tree far into the future. I'm looking forward to late spring, early summer, where I'll repot this tree. I'm going to move it slightly more towards the center of the pot. I'll also tilt the tree a bit, lowering this side and raising the other side of the tree. And I may play around with the rotational angle of the front just slightly. So that's another show tree ready. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.